Welcome to Podcast Recovery, everyone. We are your hosts, David O. and Eric V. I will now proceed to read our mission statement. Podcast Recovery is a forerunner in digital, accessible addiction recovery support. We provide ease and convenience to any and all seeking a message of recovery and hope. By broadcasting the stories of recovering addicts, we act as a complement to all other recovery services. We exist to create a global foundation platform so that any addict may hear a message of strength and hope. We contribute education and awareness by highlighting the diversity in the lives of recovering addicts to show that one addict helping another truly works. Today we are joined by Emily C. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm good.
Good. Glad you're here. Where are you from?
Originally from Dallas, Texas, but I've been living in Maryland since about 96.
Fantastic. When were you first introduced to recovery?
I think the first time for sure would be around 17 or 18-ish. My uncle actually ended up getting clean. He had a pretty intense opioid addiction and got clean down in Houston where he lives. And he, I think after about a year of being clean, kind of revealed to the family, oh, I'm clean and, I'm better now. And I remember saying to him, I smoke a lot of weed. Maybe I should try that. And nothing really came of it. I didn't really think of it. I don't think I ever seriously got clean until I think I was 23 when I actually did.
That's still pretty young.
Try. Yeah.
And how long have you been clean?
A little bit over 5 years.
All right. And with all that out of the way, I think we're ready to hear your story today. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, unless you got anything else, Eric. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
You got the floor, Emily.
Well, great. So, little background. I came from a pretty middle, high class-ish kind of family. There's a lot of money in my family, just in general. My parents lived pretty moderate lives. They taught us the value of working for your money and being honest and all of the good things, moral things that most white bread parents teach. And for some reason, it didn't really matter. I had everything that I wanted. I definitely had everything that I needed, but I didn't have parents at home. I didn't really have my parents' attention. And I remember as a young child being very attention seeking. I remember running through the middle of my mother's book club with my shorts on my head, screaming like a wild banshee, and she was mortified, but I thought it was the greatest thing ever because she was paying attention to me as she was screaming at me about how ladies don't take their pants off and put them on their heads.
That's probably a thing.
Apparently it is. And that was just kind of a theme throughout my life, and today I know that it's something that I have to deal with on a regular basis. It seemed to be a big reason why I used, and it wasn't even to the fault of my own parents. They did the best that they could with what they had, what they knew, what they were taught from their parents, and it just, for some reason stuck with me. And I didn't realize that when I started getting high. Right around puberty, I became a really unhappy person. I started wearing a lot of black clothes, a lot of boys' clothes. I was wearing a lot of, bike chains on my Jinko jeans. And yeah, I know, taking it back.
Solid 90s reference.
Totally. Yeah, and it was a constant fight, my appearance, with me and my mother. My father didn't really pay attention to really anything, so it was me and my mother fighting about it, and I insisted on wearing the boys' clothes, and she just couldn't really understand it. I think she's a product of her upbringing, born in '59, and everything. She has a certain idea of how women should look, I guess. But I really channeled that into a lot of negativity. Puberty is really hard for most people, and I already had this unstable sense of self, and I just got really depressed and started doing some self-injury, a lot of cutting. There was kind of this cutting epidemic that ran through my grade in middle school, where it was all the rage for the girls to be cutting themselves. And I remember being really angry because, I felt like I was doing it to kind of like feel something and to like mask some other pain, right? And then I kind of, in this like hipster kind of, I was doing it before it was cool kind of thing, it resented the other girls for like, cutting themselves, these tiny little paper cuts, like they weren't, just for like attention or whatever. And it was just, for me, that was the first way that I tried to like reach outside of myself and kind of just like fix whatever seemed to be wrong within me. I always felt like something was wrong and I couldn't figure out how to change that. I didn't really develop useful skills for emotional turmoil and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that started, translating into drug use. I first was exposed to drugs when I was in 7th or 8th grade. The girl that I had a huge crush on at the time, actually, her brother was driving us around and he pulls out this joint and, he lights it up, he takes a hit off of it. She takes a hit off of it sitting in the front seat. I'm sitting in the back seat. And, she turns around and offers it to me. And I say, oh, no. I don't do drugs. Because I went through the DARE program and I knew that you're supposed to say no to drugs, right? I made fun of that song.
It worked so well.
Oh, man.
I don't remember a song.
I'm not singing the song.
You remember the song?
I don't remember the song. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's a bold-faced lie, but we'll keep moving. We'll keep it moving from there.
Yeah, let's do. So I said no that first time, but, I didn't understand that when we're smoking a joint in the car with the windows up and I've never been exposed to marijuana before, like I got a contact high, I got high. I hotboxed the car and I got high. And it was kind of, I like to say that I got high for the first time on accident, but I'll never forget the way I felt when I first got drugs into my system. It felt like all that turmoil and pain just melted away, and all of the racing thoughts in my mind just stopped running around, like they were completely gone. And I remember very distinctly looking out the windows and thinking, wow, the sky is so beautiful. Look at those stars. And I'd never been able to appreciate anything at that age. It was always, life sucks and then you die and then, So it's just the fact that I was able to appreciate something beautiful like the stars and feel this relief from just being me, from just existing, And I ran with that. And, I kept it pretty tame through high school. I got into a little bit of, sticky situations. My parents tried very hard to give me the best life possible. And so I wasn't really exposed to very many scary things as a younger person. And in high school, when I'm pursuing drugs, I tend to get around some scary people. And I learned very quickly that, there's a certain way that I have to protect myself. I was raped for the first time when I was about sophomore. And it was like the classic prom night, story. I was dating somebody. He was like a linebacker on the football team, and because he had really good jokes. And, he had certain expectations for that night, and I didn't exactly have the same thought process, but, he was much bigger than me. And so he kind of got what he wanted. And I didn't know how to really fight that. And it was really traumatic for me. It was really traumatic. And instead of, facing that trauma, instead of, getting into, I was in and out of therapy since I was 12, but instead of using this therapy that I had already been in to, help work through that pain, I instead stuffed it down and masked it with more drug usage. I started getting into the party drugs a lot after that. Ecstasy, Molly, Coke, the stuff that you do for fun. And, drinking. Like I had my first drink when I was 16. Up until then, it had been like just straight weed. But I started really getting drunk. I started associating with adults, people outside of high school, because the high school boys were dangerous. That's what I learned. And I then learned that, everybody can be dangerous.
Yep.
But, there was I could spend a very long time talking about all the crazy stuff that happened to me. I got into a series of abusive relationships with men. I've been like, I've woken up next to somebody who's been stabbed because of some gang-related things. I've been run down with a car. I've had guns in my face. I've done a lot of crazy stuff for the sake of not having to feel those feelings inside, the sake of not having to be myself. I really enjoyed not being conscious of my life. And unfortunately, when that kind of a lifestyle is lived, we rack up some kind of trouble that way. And I have a sister who's like 4 years older than me, and when I was really getting into the weed smoking in middle school, she was in high school really getting into drinking and partying, and telling our parents that she was spending the night at so-and-so's house, and like her friend would say that she was spending the night at our house, and then they'd go to some party, that classic line. And my sister was not very sneaky though, and maybe she just didn't care, maybe she didn't think how to cover her tracks, but she got into a lot of trouble all the time. She was constantly, perpetually grounded, perpetually getting consequences, and she made it very easy for me to kind of slide under the radar. And I learned from her mistakes how to cover my tracks, how to stay out of trouble from the parental units, because they were the ones essentially who had the most control over my life at the time. And if they got in the way of my drug usage, that was going to be a problem. I learned about hiding vodka in the Powerade bottle, and, not stealing from the top shelf liquor because they're actually going to miss that one, that kind of a thing. And so I used to think that I spared my parents a lot of pain being, the undercover addict. But, when it finally came out that I had a lot of problems with drugs, it really was like a huge shock to them. Just like learning that I was, depressed and suicidal at a young age, that was like it hit them with a ton of bricks, because as a child, I was very seemingly happy, and they provided for me. And they had this tendency to blame themselves. Anywho, but being the fact that I was an undercover addict, I had a lot of, ability to pretend like everything was okay, seem like everything was okay. I maintained grades in high school. I maintained friendships. The majority of my friends were not aware of my drug usage. There were a few select people that, I'd go out during lunch and smoke some weed and an apple and that kind of thing in high school, and I'd get buddy. But by the time sophomore year came around, like after that whole incident, I was really associating with people who were much older, like in their mid-20s, people I had no business associating with, getting into all sorts of crazy trouble. And that's kind of the story of my life. I don't really like to participate where I am. I like to, be elsewhere. And, I had to keep up appearances, so I did go to college. I maintained grades in order to go to college, and at that time I was getting into more and more trouble, and I thought, maybe a geographical change would help. So I tried going down to Texas, because I always remember early childhood as being a wonderful time in Texas. So of course, let's go back to Texas and everything will be better.
Of course.
Not so much.
I don't think geographical changes are always the answer.
No, I mean, there are times when it can be, but the problem is I was going there and I was not changing anything. And when I'm seeking the same things in Texas that I had sought in Maryland, I find the same things. And it was an art school, it was music school, so there was a lot of psychedelics running around, and I remember I had this reputation at parties where I would get so high on whatever was there that I'd just be stuck in a corner somewhere staring into some other dimension. And, people would ask if I was okay. And my friends would be like, oh, yeah, she's just on Saturn right now. They called it, me being high, like being on Saturn, on a completely different planet, and just to let me be and it'll be fine. And there was a lot of being dumped at ERs because, I'd scare the crap out of my roommate, who wasn't really in my circles. And there's many times that I got, put in the ER for that kind of stuff. And it didn't get better, and finally, like, money made me go back to Maryland and go to a local school, and it was a commuter school, so I didn't have to deal with student life anymore. But again, I found the same things, and I picked up a job at a hotel working, reservations and front desk, guest services, and it wasn't really until then, like mid-college, that I found the opiate drugs. I found the Percocets, I found the Oxys. I started getting heavier into Coke and Molly, and like all-nighters, and my hemp was getting really expensive. It was getting really expensive, and I was high around the clock at that point. Like being conscious without something in me was just too much at that point. And I started picking up, side hustles to fund these things. I never really quite made it to heroin, which is kind of funny, it being in Baltimore. Heroin's very prevalent.
Yeah.
But I never quite made it there. Not for lack of looking, but I guess white female, it's a little bit harder to be trusted when you get, I don't know. I'm just grateful, honestly. I'm grateful that I never touched it, because I don't know if I would be sitting here talking to you two if I had.
Absolutely.
I definitely had a death wish at the end of my active addiction. I didn't stop being suicidal when I started using drugs. If anything, I was using drugs to, try to end my life. And, there's a lot of trips in and out of psych wards. I think I had this 10-year period where I went to a psych ward like every, fall or winter. It's like, oh, leaves are changing, time for Emily to go inpatient, and it was just it was kind of a vacation at that point, a vacation from my life. And no one really ever picked up that I had a drug problem. It wasn't until the last stint that somebody kind of put two and two together. I remember that time. My friend was going to college up in Westminster, and she was having this big Lebowski party and invited me up.
Nice.
And she's just she's the best. There was like some big drug bust that happened in Baltimore, where like a semi full of stuff was confiscated or whatever. That's the story that I got.
I feel like I remember that, actually.
Yeah. Apparently it's a thing.
Yes, it's a common occurrence in Baltimore.
Yeah, giant drug bust.
Yeah.
But all three of my dealers went dry at the same time. I guess they all had shipments on that particular semi. I don't know. But all three of them went dry, and I'm not the kind of person, or I wasn't the kind of person who had leftovers. I never had anything when I woke up or came to the next morning. It was always all gone, whether I remember doing it or not. And so I was facing withdrawal. Because at that point I was waking up sick, and I didn't have any way to get anything, not even like a spliff or something, to take the edge off. And so I drove up to Westminster, so sick, and got to the party and thought drinking White Russians, because that was the only drink available for the big Lebowski party.
Of course.
Yeah.
Another Caucasian Jackie.
Yeah. So drinking White Russians did not help. I would argue that it made it worse.
Yeah.
White Russians aren't going to help things. That's not going to make your day better.
That much milk during withdrawal?
Oh,
yeah, it was the worst. Ooh. I didn't have a lot of common sense. Let's just say that. I am a smart person. Common sense is a little bit harder for me. But, right. And so after like a couple of those, nothing was helping. And the withdrawal symptoms, the bottom line is the withdrawal symptoms are so intense that I actually had a psychotic break. In the middle of my friend's party. My friend who's known me since I was 7, watched me go through all this stuff, loved me through all of it, the best that she could. I had a complete meltdown at her party in her like quad, and holed myself up in somebody's dorm room, and I swear to God, they were all trying to kill me. And anytime somebody tried to come into the room, I'd throw things, and they like tried to get the campus police to help, but that didn't really work. And then they had to call the real police, and I got, a pair of bracelets and escorted to the nearest ER in the back of a cop car because I was a danger to myself and others.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents pulled some strings, got me into the psych ward closer to them, instead of in Westminster. Well, I probably would have been shipped to Towson, but they brought me back down to where they were living in Ellicott City, and that was when I got put in a dual diagnosis unit and, detoxed and, the whole thing. And after I got out of my inpatient stint, I was kind of ordered to this intensive outpatient program down in Columbia. And that was where, I was, I guess, reintroduced into Narcotics Anonymous. They had this whole, thing where you had to go to a meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to get a piece of paper signed, and it was this requirement that wasn't a requirement. I had to take my piss test, and I had to get this paper signed, and then I could finish my program, and I did. And I hated that meeting. I hated it so much, but it was not what I was interested in. But it.
Anything stick out from that first meeting?
No.
Nothing?
It did not.
Huh?
But
Are you fishing right now?
A little
fishing.
bit. Like
He's totally fishing.
I've heard some stories.
No, I'm not going to talk about that. Because honestly, I'm not even supposed to be saying Narcotics Anonymous.
It's okay.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Okay.
So your first meeting in recovery.
Yeah. My first meeting in recovery was terrible, and I hated it. And I got my piece of paper signed, and then I finished my program, and I was clean. I had drugs out of my system. It was 6 weeks without drugs, and right around that time was when I had graduated from college. I graduated from college under the influence of a lot of drugs. Which I don't know if that speaks to my intelligence or, the integrity of the collegiate, whatever, but I graduated. I have my diploma rolled up in a tube somewhere in a storage. But I was supposed to get a job, a real job. Mm-hmm. And I was still trying to keep up appearances even while in the grips of, everything. And so I had to pass a drug test to get a real job. And luckily, I had made some really good friends through the, working a hotel. I made some really good friends with some business people. And, I got an interview as a tech writer. And because I had this whole 6 weeks without drugs, I passed the drug test, right? Because, we're not going to tell anybody that I had to go inpatient.
That's probably not something you add on your resume.
No, it's not. None of my psychiatric history was put on my resume. But, I passed the drug test, so I had no reason to be clean again. And so I started using. And it was, thank God it works again. Instead of just making me better, I got high again. And I ran with that. For a while. And, but it was it didn't get any better. It was as if I had picked up where I left off. I still had the connections. I still had the associations with the shady people. Mm-hmm. I was still running my body completely into the ground, running my brain to the ground. It doesn't make for very good work at a real job, big girl job. My boss had to, I'm doing air quotes here, wake me up a lot at work because I, was very sleepy all the time. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was brutal. And so, at that point, I was so disgusted with myself that I was kind of just running people off left and right. Mm-hmm. My friends I didn't let them come around very much. I definitely isolated a lot from them. I was using drugs alone a lot. Mm-hmm. My roommate skipped out on her lease. I guess I just wasn't that great to live with. I went back to attempting suicide, that kind of a thing. And, I guess I got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. It's really hard for me to explain what went through my head. But I remembered the recovery meetings, and what I remembered the most was the fact that nobody was like unhappy that I was there. It was quite the opposite. Everyone was way too happy for me to be there. I guess in my humble opinion, people who don't even know me shouldn't try to hug me. But at that point I was so desperate and so lonely that I went back, and I went back because I wanted friends. And those people kind of like knew what I was going through, knew me, didn't really like run screaming when I told them all the heinous shit that I tried to tell them. It was kind of like I'm going to throw my worst at you, so if you stay there, then you're definitely not going to abandon me, kind of like really deep psychological broken stuff. And and it was that was the point where I guess I was ready to like make a change. And what I figured out was that using drugs was not helping as much as I thought. It was doing the opposite, actually. It was like, forgive me for quoting, who was it, Taylor Swift, putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Nice.
Yeah. Drop that little bomb right there. I love your face.
Wasn't expecting that one.
No. I'm well versed, I'm very diverse in my music.
Yeah, the T Swift is always the call sign of somebody who's very brooding and deep.
No.
Moving on.
No. So, I mean, it took me a little bit of getting with the program, I guess, but because I'm very stubborn.
It's a nice pun.
Yeah, right?
I wasn't going to say anything.
I had to.
I enjoy a good pun.
Yeah. So punny. It took a little bit of, learning the hard way before I finally, actually started trying. Because what I found out very quickly is just not using drugs doesn't really work. Because I'm just as insane without the drugs as I am with the drugs. And I had a lot of hurt to really process, and I had a lot of things that I had not dealt with, and I had to deal with them. Now that I wasn't lost in the oblivion of being high all the time, and it's taken 5 years. It's taken 5 years to work through some of it, and I learned things like I don't have control over really anything, anybody, any events, and for me it was like trying to keep myself from taking responsibility for things that I shouldn't take responsibility for. Like my relationship fails and it's my fault, and or like this person doesn't want to talk to me anymore, it's because I'm a horrible person. It was very negative towards self, but it was still like, self-centered, because I was just so focused on in my head, focused on myself. And I had to learn how to not focus there and focus outside. So I definitely had to learn a lot of things the hard way. Getting clean, I had to learn the hard way. And what I mean by getting clean is like not being under the influence of anything, even alcohol. I understood not using illicit drugs because I have to pass a drug test for, a big girl job. But I kind of still thought drinking alcohol I could do. And that became very relevant about 2 weeks into not using drugs when I got the first opportunity to drink, which was my birthday. And I kind of went like this. I went to dinner with my mom and drank about half a bottle of wine at this fancy French restaurant. So good. It was really good wine. And I remember my mom saying aren't you not supposed to drink anymore or something? And I would say to her, oh my gosh, I still can't believe I said this, and believed it too. I told her, no, it's okay. I can just make an exception for my birthday. It's totally fine.
There's a rationalization.
Oh yeah, I was in some serious denial. I had deceived the fuck out of myself. I mean,
It made sense at the time, though.
it did. I mean,
Yeah.
and it was plausible, just untrue.
Yeah.
And my mom seemed to, kind of be convinced by it, but whatever. So I left dinner and I went to a recovery meeting and met up with my, friends who were clean and didn't really like talk too much to people. I was still kind of new, so I hadn't really formed anything. I was very hanging back, and I don't know why, because I wasn't doing anything wrong. But I sat in the back, and I didn't really, associate too much. And I jetted right out of there because I had to meet up with my coworkers at the bar. We were, going to celebrate, and I went to. I'm totally gonna say it. I went to Lapa Lapas down in, historic Ellicott City. And
Feelings right now.
That's
yeah,
a choice.
I know.
Yeah. It's not the best choice. Not the worst, though.
Yeah.
And I know where you went to dinner probably then, too.
Yep. Fancy French restaurant. Yeah. I really, I'm in a lot of pain too over that whole thing. Anyways, so I lost track of time after the, 6 margarita on the rocks. I don't really remember too much after that. But I did wake up the next morning in the basement of some house that I didn't really recognize, on a street I didn't recognize. There's a couple people laying around. I didn't really recognize them. There was some paraphernalia hanging around that definitely was not alcohol only paraphernalia. I'm pretty sure some coke got involved, some pills got involved, and I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I had to get out of there.
Yeah.
Luckily, I still had my phone with me. There's a little bit of battery left. I called somebody up and got a ride back to my car, which was thankfully still in the Lapa Lapa parking lot. And that was when I realized, maybe drinking is a problem too.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a sneaky one.
it is. It's hard, especially in the beginning. It was really hard for me to accept the fact that really any substance is I will, if given the opportunity, I'll abuse it and I'll just go off the deep end with it. Because it's just so I still had the pain. I still had the trauma. I still had the low self-esteem. I still had the unfinished business, the unfinished internal business, and I wasn't looking at it. And so again, the drugs were really, really tempting and really hard to just, stay away. And so I had to do, a change. I had to stop hanging out with certain people, stop going to bars. I had to, lose some numbers. I had so many dealers. I remember one of my friends that I had made who was clean. We were sitting at the Starbucks, down the corner, and she was telling me how I need to delete these numbers of these dealers, or else I'll never be free of that lifestyle. And for some reason, her encouraging me like that just gave me the desire, the willingness, I don't know, to delete them, and I did. And I wasn't the kind of person to memorize numbers. I was born in '89. I'm an early millennial. Whatever, I'm dealing with it. But I never really memorized numbers besides when I was in elementary school. So when I got dealers' numbers, I didn't remember them, and so when they were deleted, they were gone. And that was the scariest and most freeing thing I had ever done at that point. Finally, it was like putting the nail in the coffin on those years of drug abuse, and
It's a small step, but it's a big step.
it was huge. I was terrified.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I did that. It really helped. It was another cobblestone on that path to where I am today, which is, I love where I am today. But we'll get there. Because I had a lot of learning to do. I have 5 years of learning. And like I've mentioned before, I am really stubborn and I really like to do things my way, and I had to learn, certain principles for, in order to start the healing process. I had to learn that, I don't have control over everything and not everything's going to go my way. And I just kind of have to accept that, and I have the ability to act a certain way. I have the ability to say certain things, but, manipulation, one of my most favorite tactics is manipulation. I'm very verbal. I'm very, I can pick up on people sometimes, and, I'm very good at manipulating people. And sometimes I can use that for, for good, or I can use my powers for evil. And
with great power comes great responsibility.
Really great responsibility. I just don't hang upside down with a web, so.
I'm so happy that got on.
Sometimes I get a zinger. So, it was hard. It was really hard. And I hurt a lot of people. I had some friends who had to love me right where I was, who I was, as I was. And I am so grateful that they did and let me have my process. And, I burned a couple bridges, but, I didn't get high, and I didn't drink during that process. I think that was like my one saving grace during that time period where I just wasn't trying to grow. And so at some point I just had made such a mess. I quit the job that I had, the big girl job. I quit it because, there was a rumor that I was sleeping with this woman's husband. And like, I didn't, for once, I didn't sleep with somebody's husband. So it really wasn't until I made a complete mess of things, and just really got a lot of pain that I started making changes. At that point I had quit the job that I got, in the beginning. I hated it. And there was this kind of rumor swirling around that I was sleeping with this guy's husband, and that wasn't like true for once. I wasn't sleeping with somebody's husband. And so I called a hostile work environment and just like quit. I didn't leave two weeks notice. I just kind of wrote my resignation letter and I said, gotta go. And that's not how you quit a job, guys, because I did not have a job lined up. And so I was unemployed for like 3 or 4 months. And I had a boyfriend at the time. And he and I, got clean around the same time. I think he had 6 months on me or something. And, we kind of ran around and just did whatever we wanted. And it was kind of cool. I was burning through my life savings doing it, but like we went to the beach, we saw all these concerts, we drove in the country. Like it was really this idealistic, completely unmanageable situation. I was sleeping in his house every night and still paying rent on this apartment that I never lived in. And, it was a mess. And, obviously when two people who are a little crazy get together and then spend all that time together, things start to break down. And, I was taking a lot of responsibility. I was internalizing that a lot. He would not say something, he wouldn't give me the attention that I thought I needed, or, we would have an argument and I think it was because like he didn't love me and, I'm a horrible person again, back again with the negative focus on myself and, how he's wronging me and he doesn't pay attention and so my parents' lack of attention is playing into this, and so we kind of like have this build up and then it just explodes into this messy, ugly breakup. And it was ironic because I was the one who broke up with him, and it seemed like he didn't even see it coming almost. I mean, maybe he did, but it really hit him like a ton of bricks. And I was so angry at him at the time. I was so mad. I remember we spent this night laying in his bed and we were both crying and I was just spelling out in excruciating detail every single thing he did to make me feel horrible. As if he had that power, like he had that power because I gave him that power. I put all of my hopes and my dreams and being okay into him, and he's just trying to do the same thing I'm doing. He's had his own demons to fight. He has his own, recovery journey, and I was, putting on his shoulders mine as well. And it failed. It failed, and it ended in a year plus of me doing some pretty ugly things. I'm not proud of the things that I did that year. I was openly hating him. I refused to even look at him. I refused to acknowledge he existed. Every time I came in the same vicinity as him, my blood would boil over, and I was just, and I wouldn't let him go to the same meetings I was going to because I can't stand seeing him, and I would trash him to anybody who would listen, whether they knew him or not. I would talk about how horrible of a person he is. And, I did that for a whole year, and I turned into this angry person, and I was really like hateful, and it kind of like culminated into this, like, nobody wanted to be around me, I was tolerated, when you're spitting venom like that, it's just not fun to be around. And here I am, crazy, not using drugs, believe it or not using drugs, but still crazy and still causing pain. And I finally got a wake-up call. I was celebrating, and nobody really wanted to celebrate, that year, 2 years clean. No, 3 years clean, I think. Yeah, 3 years clean, was when nobody really showed up to celebrate with me. And that was when I realized, oh, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm, maybe I'm doing something that people don't like. And I had to really take a hard look at that and really focus on, the things I needed to do to heal, right? Getting a relationship with a power greater than myself. Because when nobody else wants to talk to you, you find strength elsewhere. I learned how to put, how to tap into something else. And the program that I'm in, kind of talks about finding your own God and creating this relationship with this power that's greater than you, because everybody needs it. Because if I do it by myself, if I think I'm the most powerful person in my life, if I try to give some other human being who's imperfect that kind of power in my life, it's just going to end in ruin. Like, I proved it for myself. I proved it when I tried to do it for myself. I proved it when I tried to turn my boyfriend at the time into, my higher power, and it crashed and burned. And so the only thing that was left, was, finding the real deal, figuring that out for myself. And I'm not here to preach religion. I grew up in a Lutheran household. I hated God, and so I had to figure it out for myself. And I did, I did. It's an ongoing thing, but I feel like I've really tapped into something that gives me, strength and the ability, like, when all else fails, when, my friends don't pick up the phone, when I feel like, I'm isolating myself and I feel like nobody wants to hear anything, because I'll play mind games with myself all day, every day. I will convince myself that nobody wants to hear my shit. And, so I still have that. I'll always have that. It's like this safety net. And, I started sorting through all of my past and really, I got a therapist who was, familiar with people with addiction problems. And I was honest with her for the first time ever. I just spilled it all out. I even told her how I have this habit of seeing a therapist for 6 months and then being like, meh, I don't want to do it anymore, and just ghosting. I admitted to my therapist in session 2 that I ghost my therapist.
Oh, the millennial ghosting.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. And I remember her saying, well, I won't take offense to it, but I'm just here to help. And, she's been really helpful. I've been seeing her for almost 2 years now. And with her help, I've been able to work on the stuff that is the underlying things. Because I feel like I had a lot going on. I had drug usage, I had self-harm, I had, just being somebody who struggles with addiction. I feel like it's more than just, drugs, just, gambling, just sex. That, it's more than the obsession of whatever I need to make myself better. There's something else going on. What's the why? What's the why behind the reason why I need to do these things? And I finally, with 3.5 years clean, found the courage to, look at the why. And I mentioned before when I was using drugs, like I was in and out of psych wards, I was seeing psychiatrists, they were throwing all sorts of psych meds at me. And when I came, to get clean, I was on like 4 different psychiatric medications and 5 more medications to manage the side effects of the psychiatric medications. I was popping 12 pills a day. It was like it's almost as if I didn't stop using, but they were being prescribed, and I was taking them as prescribed, sort of. And I was under this impression that I was going to be taking psychiatric medication for the rest of my life. And I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not here to talk about the validity of mental illness. I believe that mental illness is a thing. But what I found out is that, I had this bipolar diagnosis that may not be a real thing, because when you used drugs like I did, where uppers and downers just kind of like you take the flavor of the day or the minute and whatever happens, you roll the dice, you see what happens. I was exhibiting the symptoms of bipolar disorder. And after having a couple years clean, like, getting outside of the post-acute withdrawal syndrome, where I'm just a freaking, puddle of mess, I was finally getting some clarity to where, maybe I could look at that piece. And with the help of my therapist and a psychiatrist who, I was very upfront and honest with about my goals, I learned how to take control of my healthcare. Instead of saying, yes, I'll take whatever pill you give me, saying, no, I want to do this. You need to help me get there. And, taking an active role in my life in general, was just something new for me. And now today I'm on, I take a low dose antidepressant because, again, I have to process through some trauma, and, and I don't know what's going to happen when I process that fully. I don't know what emotions are going to crop up. And so I take the low dose antidepressant during this process. And then when I finish with that, I'm looking at maybe getting off the antidepressant because I don't know if I have a chemical imbalance anymore. I'm not imbalancing my chemicals anymore. And that was a huge revelation for me. It was huge. And it wasn't until years after not using drugs that I was even entertaining that as a possibility, and it was like a miracle in and itself for me. And I learned how to take care of my body. I learned how to brush my teeth on a regular basis. I learned how to, I went through a period of time where I was eating everything because it just felt good to eat good food. And I got really big, I got really big. I'm blessed in the fact that I, gain weight proportionately. So it's just, I guess, a bigger version of myself. Because I remember, realizing that I was fat at some point. I was like a size 16 and I was huge. I mean, for me, I'm not I don't carry that weight, I'm not meant to. That's not my body type. And I remember realizing that I was fat and saying it out loud to somebody and them saying, oh no, but you're proportionate. You still look so good, and it's not like I was short for people who wanted to have sex with me and, date me and stuff. I was running through boys like it was, going out of style. After that major breakup, when I finally stopped hating men, I started being a man eater basically. And a lot of guys, I gotta, make some sort of amends to that because I've caused some damage there too. I spent many a year, I spent over a decade not learning how to live life appropriately. And so to expect me to, I guess, do life perfectly after only being off drugs for a few years is not too realistic. I'm trying to be better about it, but yeah, so that period of my life where I was just kind of chewing through guys like they were some bubblicious. I was big, I was big during that time, and maybe they were chubby chasers. I don't know. But I had this realization, just like I had the realization that I probably can't use drugs anymore. I had the realization that maybe I need to take care of my body. I was uncomfortable in my body, and then I decided to change it. And I practice the same principles that I learned in recovering from drugs in recovering from overeating all the time. I realized that I'm using food to fix some sort of feeling inside me. So whenever I eat, I need to make sure it's not because I'm trying to fix a feeling, it's because I'm hungry, you know? And learning what hungry means, you know, and learning what full means. Oh my gosh. You know, I got in the habit of eating until I wanted to puke, you know, and I thought, oh, that's full. You know, that's when I should stop eating, when I physically can't eat anymore, you know? And I realized, you know, I can stop eating when I'm just not hungry anymore.
Yep.
And then moving around, you know, if people always ask me, you know, I'm half the person I used to be, I joke, because I'm a size 8 now. You know, I went from a 16 to an 8. And I started like working out, you know, building muscle tone and things like that. I can like deadlift my body weight now, which is kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah, I can hurt somebody probably. I don't know.
We got a badass over here.
I got some muscles. Reflex. Oh yeah. Look at them triceps. Anyways. So,
it's a radio show. Nobody's going to see that.
Well, you do.
That's true.
You could, never mind. So people would ask me, you know, like, oh, how'd you do it, right? And I know they wanted me to say something like, you know, I took some bear piss and buried it in the, you know, the dirt for 5 days, and then I drank it and I magically shed all the weight. But that wasn't, you know, I didn't do any fad diet.
Is that a thing?
No.
I've never heard of that.
Top ahead.
Maybe
That's totally, I just made that up.
Native American weight loss.
Just
101.
did that. Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't work.
No.
Just like any fad diet really doesn't work. Like when I tell people what I did, you know, like I made lifestyle changes, you know, just like I had to make lifestyle changes to recover from drug usage.
You did the work.
Yeah, I did a lot of work, and it took a long time, and nobody liked to hear that, but they like to tell me how good I looked, and so, you know, that's cool, I guess. So I feel like, you know, throughout this whole time of not using drugs, I've had the opportunity to start looking at my entire life, you know, all facets of my life. You know, getting my health under control, getting my mental health under control, getting my drug dependence under control, and, you know, eventually getting my career under control. You know, after being unemployed for multiple months, running through my life savings that my parents had given me, because, you know, upper middle class, I had to like get a job, you know, and I got a job that I hated. And that was during the year that I was so angry. But then when I stopped being angry, I just couldn't be at the job anymore. So I got a different one. And I got an opportunity. And it was something that I never thought that I'd ever want to do. You know, I got an English degree for my bachelor's. I was going to be, you know, the next Stephen King. There's no next Stephen King. When that man dies, like, we're going to lose a serious pinnacle of a person.
Yeah.
Love you.
No. It's a nice plug for Stephen King.
Yeah, you should get a sponsorship from him.
Eventually.
He'll retweet it later.
Yeah.
Totally. So, you know, but this was like a technical job. It was an IT job. And I took it because the money was good and it was kind of interesting. And I love it. You know, I'm still at that job 3 years later. I've been moving up pretty steadily. I'm good at it. I'm good at this job. And my hard work is recognized there. And I feel like, you know, I go to work, I wake up and I go to work and I'm happy to be there and I'm excited to do the work. And it's, you know, if you love your job, you never work a day in your life, right? I never in a million years thought that I would enjoy working for the man, you know, wearing business casual, covering up my tattoos, and like, you know, sitting at a computer and doing data analytics, you know. But I really, you know, the reality is my job is I get to solve puzzles all day. You know, I love solving puzzles and riddles and it's a lot of fun. And so there you go. You know, another aspect of my life that's kind of under control, I guess. Well, you know, it's stabilized. I try not to jinx anything, you know, because I always feel like there's a possibility that I could lose it. You know, all I have to do is...
The other shoe is going to drop.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, all I have to do is use drugs again. You know, I've proven it to myself over and over and over again. The minute I put a drug in my body, like, everything goes to shit. And unfortunately, nowadays, in Baltimore especially, like, if I use, it could be the last time I take a breath. You know? I think it would be plausible for me to find some heroin in the streets of Baltimore today.
Yeah.
And those things, it's killing people. It's killing people today. And I go to a lot of funerals now.
Yeah.
You know,
just recently.
Yeah, just recently I had somebody who I really cared about a lot, you know, and I hadn't.
Both of us.
Yes. Both of us. Yeah, David, you came in clutch at that funeral.
It was a rough day. It was a rough day. It's never easy to lose friends to the addiction.
Yeah, and you know, I like to say that I have the privilege to feel that pain. You know, to not only have the ability to feel the pain and not allow it to destroy my life, but have the ability to care about somebody to the point where I do feel that pain when they're taken away. Because when I was using, I didn't care about anybody, not even myself, you know. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and today, like I'm focusing on a lot of different things today. You know, 5 years ago it was, how the hell am I going to make it through another day without using drugs? I want to use drugs so bad, and I have the ability to focus on a lot of different things. I guess is the best way I can say it. So like I have this core group of people that I hang out with, and one of these people, he suggested that we get together at the beginning of the year and like come up with a word or a phrase that like sets the tone for the new year. You know, it's coming from him, it makes sense. And so we all sat around, and I thought it was really, really hokey at first. And I thought, you know what, whatever, I'll bite. I'm going to participate. I'm a participator today, you know. And so I chose the phrase self-actualization, because I kind of feel like in this year I have like really hit a stride. I'm not really trying to figure out how to get caught up with the rest of the people who didn't take a 10-year detour into drug addiction. You know, I feel like I'm really on level playing ground with people of my age. And now I have the ability to figure out what I'm on this earth for in the first place, you know. So, you know, I've kind of been doing this whole not using drugs thing for, you know, a little over 5 years now. And I feel like I got to this point where I don't have to like flounder to keep up with other people my age who didn't take like a 10-year detour into drug usage. And like I feel like I'm on level playing ground now. And so I kind of want to figure out like what I've been put on this earth for in the first place. You know, like self-actualization, you know, reaching my full potential. And I feel like I have the ability to do that now. You know, I've been exploring a lot of, you know, different things, like my hobbies. Like I picked up writing again, you know, because I really do enjoy writing, and I'm doing some flash fiction and just stuff to, you know, really keep myself occupied. And I'm like on this online forum where we give each other feedback as writers. It's a lot of fun. You know, I'm not going to be, you know, the next big best-selling author, but
next Stephen King.
You might be.
Don't doubt yourself.
But the point is, like, I'm doing it for my own enjoyment, my own enrichment, and that's something that I enjoy. And you know, I do a lot of outdoor stuff. You know, I'm getting into trail running because I have to take my fitness to the next level. You know, and I'm exploring like what it is to be in relationship with people. You know, my idea of relationships was very narrow. Most of my life, and I've kind of gotten to this point where, you know, a lot of relationships can be love relationships without being the whole, you know, you're my boyfriend, or you know, you're my husband, or that kind of a thing. I kind of look at relationships as I can get different things from different people, and they can like cross over. Like I have a friendship where, you know, I get love and emotional intimacy and you know, security. And then I have, you know, a few romantic relationships where I can get, you know, sex from and love and intimacy and commitment. And, you know, I have relationships with my coworkers that don't necessarily have love and intimacy and sex, but I get a lot of, you know.
Not with your coworkers.
Yeah, no, hopefully not.
I learned that lesson very, very long ago, that you don't shit where you eat, and that rings true.
Business and pleasure don't mix.
They really don't. I love my job. I'm not trying to mess that one up. But I have a lot of, you know, mentorship type relationships, both, you know, being the mentor and the mentee, I suppose. And so I'm really like, it is now.
It is now. It's in the lexicon.
Yeah. So I'm really learning about that. So it's been really cool, and I feel like I have the ability to really connect and relate with people, and I'm in this position where I have enough experience living my life that when I come across other people who have the same struggles that I had, and experience the same feelings that I still sometimes feel today, I'm just better with feeling them. I have the ability to help them. I have the experience. I've gone through a ton of things. I've only mentioned the tip of the iceberg here with you, but I have a lot of experience getting through things and surviving them, and also surviving them without having to use drugs or anything else to really be okay with it. And that's, I guess that's kind of why I agreed to come do this podcast. I think this is a really cool thing that you're doing. I hear about people around the world who don't really have access to the resources that I have access to. I feel very privileged where I am in the world and in the age, in the times. And so this is really exciting and really cool. And I appreciate you guys coming out and asking me to, tell my story. Yeah.
All right. Well, we definitely appreciate you. We thought you did a great job.
Very appreciative.
Is there any I don't know, final advice you would give to the new addict or the experienced addict or anything?
I think the thing I find myself telling people the most is hang in there. Mm-hmm. There were so many times that I wish I could, I wished to give up, and just go back to what I knew, even if it was painful and causing a lot of problems. And, I think the difference between me then and me today is the fact that I just hung in there and waited a little bit longer. And then, that was kind of the time that I experienced a miracle. Yeah.
I mean, that's 100% crucial. I mean, just that tenacity in the recovery process and just holding on, because at least for me, 5.5 some years into this, you really surprise yourself how far you come from point A to point B. And I thought you talked about that ad nauseum. No, where we are to where we get, where we come from is an amazing journey. And it really is. And it's a lot about gratitude. We really have to keep that up front, and being realistic about where we are. I don't know. You got anything, Eric?
Yeah. I do have a question. I have some questions.
Okay.
So, coming from a place of affluence, does socioeconomic status ever get into the way? Does that ever compare you out of a meeting?
So I had to admit it was a little hard, to listen to people talk about their troubles. I hear a lot of people, I meet a lot of people who come from less privileged backgrounds. And for a while in the beginning, I didn't want to let people know that I came from money. I'm not saying that, I'm Bill Gates' daughter or anything, but I had a grandmother who lived in a mansion out in, this on 13 acres of land, and I have a lawyer uncle, and my family has money, but that obviously money didn't save me from, addiction problems. If anything, it probably prolonged it.
Mm-hmm. And you see it as high up as Hollywood. I mean, the stars struggle with addiction just like people at the bottom of the ladder, for lack of better euphemisms.
Because really, it wasn't the fact that I didn't have nice clothes or that I had to buy government cheese that I used drugs.
Did you say government cheese?
There's government cheese?
Yeah, you don't know about government cheese?
Is that American cheese?
It's like a block of cheese that you get with your food stamps.
I don't eat cheese, so I'm not really in the know.
We got a freaking vegan over here. So
It's a struggle.
The point is, it wasn't the fact that didn't have money. Money had nothing to do with why I used. I used because of the way I felt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I come across people, of all skin color, all ethnic, all backgrounds. People from around the world have the same problem.
Sexual identity, creed, religion, lack of religion.
Yes, it doesn't matter who I am. It has everything to do with what I feel, and that goes the same for what I use to fix that too. Yes, I love to get high to fix it, but I also ate food to fix it. I also had a lot of sex to fix it. I'll reach for anything. As long as I don't have to feel it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I had another question. Okay, here we go. So, being a relapser like myself, you guys have been clean for a while.
Yes.
So, Emily, with over 5 years clean, how do you keep, that feeling from 5 years ago, 5+,
Ooh. Yes.
in the forefront? Because myself, I'll forget about it in a second.
That's a good one.
How do you remember that pain?
So, I'm gonna make a Hulk reference here.
Nice.
So you
Yes.
know how in one of the Avengers movies, Bruce says, that's my secret. I'm always angry.
Yes.
Ooh,
And that's how he can turn into the Hulk whenever, really.
I'm
kind
loving
of.
this moment so much.
I am a little bit of a nerd here. But the point is, I experience that pain regularly. Now it's not so much pain that I want to use again. Although I've had fleeting moments where I thought, man, if I were high or drunk right now, this would be great. But for some reason, I feel this need to dig into this what I call a void. I feel the need to dig into it, and when I uncover, I experience the pain over again. It's slightly different, and I think that's just, I guess it's actively working on myself. I have the opportunity to feel that fresh pain and get reminded. And now I have a little bit more practice of just feeling it. I've gotten really good with crying. I used to refuse to cry.
I'm a crier. I cry.
You're a crier.
I'm very aware of that.
I actually, no, I cried yesterday. Yeah.
But about what?
But that's for a different time.
Manly tears. Very manly tears into his beard.
Absolutely, 100%.
Manly beard.
I wanted to throw my hat into that, my little 2 cents into that, and actually counter with another Avengers reference from Doctor Strange. Yeah. As far as maintaining a level of gratitude and I don't know, excitement and dedication about recovery, is the quote from Doctor Strange was that we never lose our demons, we just learn to live above them. And once I in the movie when I heard that, I was like, oh yes, I was like, it's so true, because you talked about it, so many of those character defects are always there on the shelf, all those obsessive thoughts, those compulsive thoughts, those really detrimental parts of us that are always there are kind of always going to be there. We're humans. We're going to make mistakes, especially as addicts. We're going to beat ourselves up with those mistakes. We're going to overthink things. I know Emily is an overthinker for sure.
Never.
I'm 100% an overthinker. But it's about.
What do you mean by that?
Well played. But no, it's about just constantly staying focused and really a lot of those behaviors that I exhibited in active addiction, like that persistence to go get drugs, rain, sleet, snow, or high water. I have to do that same thing for recovery. When I don't want to seek recovery or talk to my network or seek out the recovery process, that's probably when I should be doing it the most, because an addict alone is in bad company, as we've always heard. But yeah, like as long as I'm constantly involving myself and being of service to other people, like that's probably the biggest thing for me is getting away from my own selfishness and self-centered attitudes and behaviors. That's when like I just start feeling better about life in general, and I feel better about like why I'm here and what I'm doing. And this podcast is a prime example of that. It's for reaching out to the people that need it. I don't know. Good question, Eric. Very good. I don't know. I think we're about at a close here. I think we'd like to say a big thank you to Emily for coming on the show with us.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. And I believe at this point we will read our vision statement for podcast recovery. Here at Podcast Recovery, we're aiming to expand the scope of support for recovering addicts. Accessibility and convenience of helpful services is paramount to combating addiction. We work to bring the message of recovery to every addict, wherever and whenever it is needed. We believe that a powerful voice of recovery should be obtainable, practical, and at the touch of a button. Every addict deserves to hear a message of hope, and Podcast Recovery is here to provide it. And that's all we have for...
Oh, just, follow us on Facebook.
Oh, yeah. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter.
Check out the website.
Check out the website. And we will be appearing next week. Showing up, broadcasting next week with another speaker, possibly another topic, and more experience, strength, and hope for you. And I'd like to say thank you to Emily once more.
Thanks again.
We're your hosts, David O. and Eric V. And have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.